This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How's it going? How's your summer going? Rob Barrett's my engineer. I get a nice healthy nod over there. It must be going pretty good. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. How's our current political climate working out for you? Mike Singler, for one, is frustrated. He believes the majority of Americans are not far right or far left. We are somewhere in between. He's an executive at a Fortune 100 property and casualty insurance company, and so fed up, he was inspired to write his book entitled The American Taxpayer, hoping meaningful discussion and action will follow. Mike.
Trying to get people to wake up, because most people, they don't care about all this ancillary stuff. Most of them don't care. You know, we expect politicians to go to work just like we do every day. Do their job. You know, we say we need more taxes. I personally feel like you could take 100% of my paycheck in years, and it still wouldn't be enough for the politicians.
What exactly do you want to see happen?
I want to see people get involved and vote. Okay? I mean, that's the only thing we can do. And people have taken advantage of hardworking Americans because we're not paying attention. You take Trump. Trump's a byproduct of what's been going on. I mean, he's not a politician, and the American people got tired, and this is what's occurred.
Is that good or bad?
Well, the jury's still out on it. I mean, if he ends up being like another politician, throw him out. And I would ask you, why would somebody want to be a career politician? Wasn't that supposed to be a civic duty? Go up there and serve and go back home and go back to your life?
Well, unfortunately, you need money to get elected, and that's why we have lobbyists, and that's why politicians end up in the pockets of lobbyists who give them money and say, okay, now you got elected, what are you going to do for me?
But I just don't think the common guy has a voice anymore. I'm just trying to be a voice of reason. The book itself is based on common sense, mutual respect, and accountability.
Do you give us any examples of what you mean by that?
Oh, yeah.
Like what? Give me an example.
Let me just say this. When they had the health care bill back whenever under President Obama, it was 100% one party and zero the other. You can't tell me statistically that some constituents in the Democrats didn't want it like that, or Republicans did want it like that. Same thing with the tax reform. You know, how do you have bills that split on party lines? That's just not statistically possible.
You know, Mike, I think Obamacare was a blueprint, and you didn't have to like all of it, and it needed room for improvement. And there were things that should be done right, and there were things that should be redone, and there were things that should be thrown out. But the basic premise was, do you think all Americans deserve to have health care, and should the government figure it out?
I want everybody to have health care. There are ways to provide that health care, and we have to keep in mind insurance is the transferring of risk. But I've got a section in there that makes common sense. You could have an uninsured risk pool in every state that if you got declined for regular health insurance, that you went into the uninsured risk pool that had all the same coverages that a regular major medical had. And I, as somebody that's working, I'd be willing to pay 2% on my premium to fund that, as long as the insurance company did the same thing. So there you had 4% of the taxpaying public in my state funded the uninsured risk pool. You wouldn't have needed 186 new federal bureaucracies to oversee it either. I mean, if you look at what was the big motivating factor behind it, you had 30 million people uninsured, so we blew up 290 million people's insurance so we could get 10 million of the 30 million insured, and they still can't afford their out-of-pocket. So what did we really accomplish?
Right. Do you think insurance companies, health insurance companies, should be profitable?
No, I think they should make some profit. I mean, that's capitalism, but I think there should be a limitation on a social company like this. You know, I mean, we're talking about healthcare, right?
Mike,
so
we just started the discussion. This is the discussion you're looking for.
Okay.
So everybody should read your book. It's called The American Taxpayer, and start discussing it and start voting and demand that your politicians stand for what they believe in.
Alice, think about this. What happens when they get elected? The first thing they have to do is start raising funds for the next election.
Yep.
They're not doing the people's work. So why don't we do, everybody gets 1 6-year term, and then you have to sit out a 6-year term. You want to get reelected after that 6 years, come on back. But you stop all that, I got to start politicking for the next election, and let's get up here and roll up our shirt sleeves and get this stuff done.
All right, Mike, thank you so much. Our next author is a real character. Eugene Paul says he was born in Connecticut, raised in South Jersey, grew up in Vietnam, went to college in California, and spent over half his life in Jamaica as a fugitive. The name of his book, 38 Years of Fugitive. How did that happen, Eugene?
Well, I jumped bail on a growing marijuana charge in New Jersey. They were going to give me 2 years in state prison. And look what's happening today, huh? They charged me with possession to intent to distribute.
What'd you do, have pot plants in your backyard? How'd they even find them?
Somebody saw them and turned them in. I guess I was about 28.
You skipped bail and they didn't find you for 38 years.
I skipped bail, went to California, got caught up in the middle of a cocaine deal to the DEA, made bail there, and jumped bail, went to Canada, from Canada to Jamaica. But I had a good ID and had a passport, so I was traveling back and forth from the States to Jamaica using an alias that I got from a kid that died when he was 2 years old.
Did you have to buy that?
No, I had to just look up all the information. Well, I had the FBI and local sheriffs come down on me, and once my fingerprints came back, then they knew who I was.
And where was this?
Northern Florida.
So then what happened? What'd they do when they realized you'd been a fugitive for 38 years?
The marijuana charge never showed up on the computer. The charge with the DEA said they couldn't bother with my case anymore. So all they could get me for was stealing a dead kid's identification. So I did 3 months in county jail, 2 years probation.
And when you got out?
I went back to Jamaica. My wife got deported and couldn't come back to the States, so I had a choice: live close to the VA hospital for my health benefits, or move to Jamaica and be with the woman I love. So I moved back to Jamaica.
What'd you do for a living in Jamaica?
I ran a small hotel. I also smuggled marijuana from Jamaica to the States.
You are something else, and you were able to do that undetected.
If a cat has 9 lives, I'm 9 cats.
But you never got arrested or never got caught smuggling pot from Jamaica to the States?
No, but one time I had to swim the Swanee River.
The Swanee River?
Yeah, they busted a truck that had marijuana in it. Oh, I was in the car following the truck. The guy wouldn't open the back of the truck, so he said, I follow us to the police station. Instead of going to the police station, we had walkie-talkies then. There were no cell phones. We told the driver, listen, we're pulling into the rest area. You pull into the rest area and leave the truck, and we'll jump in the car and we'll take off. He came into that rest area. We were just coming out of the bathroom, and he jumped in the car and took off. And some old lady said, there's some of them over there. So we headed for the woods. My life's been full of excitement, and after every chapter, I really have to thank my lucky stars and guardian angels for keeping me alive and keeping me free.
Why did you write this book now?
Because I was retired, I did my probation, moved back to Jamaica, and I thought it was about time to write the story of my life. I'm a boasty kind of person, an exhibitionist, and I wanted to spread my story.
And there's more to the story because you've been at a veterans hospital for the last 2 months. Why?
I was building a treehouse in Jamaica, and this huge mango tree, 40 foot off the ground. I made an elevator out of some steel and used a truck winch to let me up and down, and the winch let go from the top. I fell 40 foot on the concrete. That should have killed me, but I cheated death again. But I crushed my heels. I shattered the bone in my arm. I had steel poking in me all over the place. And I went to a Jamaican hospital, which they didn't do nothing. So I told my wife, I said, you get me an air vac out of here as soon as possible. So got me to the VA hospital close to death. So that's just, I guess this has to be an added chapter to the book, saying double miracles. I beat death twice in 48 hours.
All right, Eugene. Going home to Jamaica, determined to walk again and keep writing. Cannot make this up. Sarah Huff Mitchell is a social worker who worked with kids looking for their forever families. And every night she would make up stories to get her own kids to sleep. And one night, her book, Little Little, came to mind. And what happened next, Sarah?
After I finally got her to sleep, I thought, well, that's not a bad one to write down. So I wrote it down, and then I taught myself graphic design a few years ago. So I thought, well, I should just illustrate this. So one thing led to another, and I ended up getting it published.
How's the story go?
Well, Little Little is a star, and she's all alone, and she wants a family. So she sets out on an adventure to find a family of her own and a group to belong to. And she meets a couple of different groups along the way, but neither group is the right group for her. So they explain for one reason or another that they're not the right group, but if she's patient, she can find the right group. And then she comes upon a family that has young stars in it that would be like siblings. And they explain to her that the only thing missing from their family is her. And she has found her home. The first family was an older family or an older group of stars, and they weren't up to having a young star be part of their family. And then the second group was, a group that had old and young, but they were pretty full, and they were willing for her to stay with them, but they knew that they weren't the perfect fit for them. So she just kept searching. And my point with it was, a lot of times kids have to go through a lot of hurdles to find the family that's right for them. And it's never an easy thing going through the adoption process or going through the foster care process and then into adoption to find the family that's a good fit for them. And it can take time, and it can take a lot of years. But I was hoping that kids would understand that, it can take some time, but if you wait and you're patient, someone out there is meant for you, and there's a family meant for you, and you just have to be patient and find it.
This breaks my heart.
I think that it's a story that any kid can relate to, because even if you're in a perfect family, you might have trouble making friends at school. And it's, every kid's going to struggle at some point in their life fitting in, and they need to know that, the right people are out there. You just got to keep looking. And so hopefully I can get that message across. Another book that I wrote shortly after my grandfather passed away, and it's a children's book about grief, and I just haven't had the time to sit down and illustrate it like I'd like to, because I'm still struggling with the grief process. But when inspiration strikes, I'll use it. I'd like to have more books out there. I think it's been fun for me, and it's been fun for my family to have this happen. And, I enjoy sharing it at the school. And so if an idea pops in my head, I'll put it on paper and see what I can make of it.
All right, so maybe I'll talk to you again sometime. We have got to take a very short break, but we're coming right back, so should you. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books, and unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them, and they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
We're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Rochelle Weisvogel taught kindergarten for 27 years in Columbus, Ohio. And every Jewish New Year, she found herself looking for a particular book for her students, and she never found it. So she wrote it. It's called The Lonely Isle. Explain, Rochelle.
Well, I always looked for a book that would tell where the shofar or the ram's horn comes from. And there was never a book out there that would explain that to the kids. So I always used to take 2 ram's horns that we blow on the Jewish New Year and put it on my head and say, this is the way the animal looked. But after a while, I said, this is ridiculous. I should write a story so that the kids have something to remember. So I used to draw on the chalkboard the story as I told it. And every time I finished telling the story, the kids would say, well, tell it over. I want to hear it again. Every year I would tell the story. And after a while I said, I really should write this down. I should publish it. And it's been my dream for a long time to publish it. But I finally found the right publisher. The publisher had the right artist. So it all worked out that I got it published last year.
Nice. And it's The Lonely
Isle. Ayil is the Hebrew word for ram.
I'm surprised, though, that there was nothing out there.
No, I mean, even today when you look, I have not seen any story about a ram, nonfiction, where it just tells facts, but not a cute little story that you can engage a kindergartner to remember where it comes from.
Yeah, and have fun with it.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Does this give you an avenue to
get
it out there?
Well, I did read it to my students. They're not Jewish, so they wouldn't really appreciate the whole idea of the ram's horn. But I teach in a Columbus Adventist, and I teach in a Christian school where they learn the Bible every day, and they learned that a ram's horn is something that the Jewish people used to use in the desert when they called congregation together, when they announced war. For different reasons, they used the ram's horn. So when I read them the story, they said, oh, yeah, they knew it from the Bible, but they don't actually see a ram's horn every Jewish New Year. So I brought in a ram's horn to show them how it's blown and to show them what it sounds like. But it's not the same effect as reading it to Jewish kids who go to synagogue and see the ram's horn being blown every Jewish New Year. And I'm trying to publicize my book for Jewish schools and Jewish bookstores and Jewish websites. I'm having a book signing in Cover to Cover Bookstore in Arlington here in Columbus, and that's right before the Jewish New Year. So they're, advertising the fact that I'm going to be reading the book, and there'll be a book signing. And I'm trying to get a book signing in the 2-day schools here and the Hebrew schools. But, right now it's summer vacation and they're not thinking about September yet, but September is when the Jewish holiday is. So I'm trying to get things set up on the calendar so that I can read the book to kids locally.
Yeah.
I was in the Jewish newspaper here. They have a Ohio Jewish Chronicle. The article came out really, really nice, and they put it in the Jewish paper here. And there are people that receive the Ohio Jewish Chronicle in other cities because they used to live in Columbus and they still wanted to see what's going on in Columbus. So it did get coverage from there, but I'm just trying to widen my range. So I'm trying to push my book as much as possible so that by the time the Jewish New Year hits, the sales, go higher.
Sounds like a good plan, Rochelle. Thank you. Dr. W. Gabriel Taylor is a pastor and a professor, and in his book entitled You Can't Tell It Like I Can, he shares close calls with death. So I'm assuming you have experience with this?
Well, I decided to write this book because there are people who are going through near-death experiences, such as I have experienced, and I felt that they need to be encouraged because my strength lie in the Lord Jesus Christ, who took me through my near-death experiences and also my call into the gospel ministry.
What was your near-death experience?
Well, I had a near-drowning experience. I was in a major car accident in Los Angeles, California, which comatose me, and the results of that was wheelchair, crutches, and braces until total recuperation. I had major brain surgery in 2000. I have experienced ulcers that was eroding the inside of the intestines, and I have survived those kind of illness.
And it's because of your faith in God.
Right.
Do you tell stories of other people that have near-death experiences?
Yes, that they can be encouraged and be hopeful that they can recuperate or even be healed if they place their faith in God. You're going to find in my book that I had a divine call on my life, and that is to preach the gospel. And I explained that although death overshadowed me, that the inevitability could not take place until that call was fulfilled, because that was my divine destiny. And so although I encountered death many, many times, it was not my time to die or vanish from this world until the call of God was fulfilled. And I encourage people that if they know that they have a purpose in this life, that purpose of God must be fulfilled before they can leave this earth.
Well, when did you feel this calling?
I've been a minister of 46 years. And because I had leukemia at 12 years old, but I was supposed to have died, I still live to tell about it. 10 years, that's 70 years. 58 years ago, I was not supposed to be here, according to Dr. Price at the time that I developed leukemia between 11 and 12, which he said to my mama I was supposed to have been dead. And the truth of the matter is that I never thought that I would live to get grown. And not only surpass 21, 31, 41, 51, 61, but headed to 71 years of age. And I'm from a family of 20 children. My dad had an older son prior to marriage to my mother. My mother gave birth to 19 children, and 13 of those survived or reached adulthood. And I was the sickly one among them. And 6 of them have already preceded me in death.
You could probably write a book on growing up in a house with 13 children.
Yeah.
All right. Arnitha is a social worker in Miami-Dade County. She runs programs dealing with violence, conflict, bullying in the schools. She also works as a therapist, and she's published several books on her own, but this is her first through page. It's entitled Get Through Going Through Life. Arnitha.
Okay, it's about wearing the whole armor of God, which is for warfare and dealing with issues of life, problems. And so it comes out of Ephesians 6 chapter, where it talks about the heart, the breastplate, the shield, having faith, covering our feet with the gospel of peace. So the tools that was used in warfare in the biblical days is taken as a metaphor today, and so I talk about it as far as how it's related to spiritual warfare. So they had to have armor in an actual physical war. And so when we talk about spiritual war in dealing with life issues, then we're talking about the armor that God has provided for us. So that's basically, so it talks about going through life, using those pieces, the armor pieces, in dealing with life issues.
Do you use examples of your own life?
Yes, I do. Yes, ma'am. I tell you, I use examples of my experience in working in the schools and working with folks and experiences that I had in raising my child and just going through life. So I use my experiences. And also as a social worker, I use those experiences in also not just personally, but in a professional way too.
I guess you've seen a lot of examples where God works through people. Is there any one situation that sticks out that we'll read about in your book?
It's one, and it's somewhere, I think, in the beginning of the book where it talks about, he would give me, through prayer, different topics to study. And even with this particular book here, I was studying his whole armor. And during the study, I felt like it took too much of my time. And I told God I didn't have time for this. So I kicked it to the curb, and that was during the time I was working in the schools dealing with the violence and writing grants, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So after time passed by and my money I got very broken. And so I cried out to God. I wanted to know what was going on. As a matter of fact, I was on my way to Bible study. I was at the red light. I had to stop. I was behind the car, and that's when I put my head on the steering wheel, asking God, what's up? What's going on? You know, he has a way of showing us in the natural and in the spirit, you know. So what happened was I lifted my head off the steering wheel just in time. I almost ran into the back of a person's car. And he said very clearly to me, I got your back. And that's when I repented. And he gave me actually my first book then. I wrote that, got that out the way. And then I had to go back to the study he gave me. And that book is what we're talking about now. So that's one of the ways that, for me, he's real.
Nice, Arnitha, and thank you for all the work you do. And thank you, Page Publishing Book Club fans, for joining us. We hope our authors have inspired you, maybe planted the seed that'll get you writing. If you've missed anything on this show or any show, all you have to do is go to 710WOR.com and check out our podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Talk soon.